So there is actually a fairly large academic field that is trying to understand subjective well-being, happiness, etc. Individually, there are genetic factors that are very important for happiness levels. We tend to have a mood set point. It's not absolute. It can shift over the life, and certain life events can move it, but it's not going to budge that strongly.
Is that for an individual? Is that for each individual? So people's...
So you could call it a mood set point or a hedonic set point. So I happen to have very high hedonic set point. Almost no matter what happens, I'm pretty cheerful and happy. Somewhat embarrassing at funerals, of course, but generally I enjoy it. I also have relatives who have a very low set point. And this is, of course, super unfair. Even if good things happen to them, they go up a bit and then they return to their gloomy selves. So part of this is probably just pure biology, variants that do seem to be predisposing in different ways. Some of it, though, is psychology. It seems like some of these genes actually act on our personality because of how we interpret when we get a happy surprise or a sad discovery, whether we respond in the right way. And depending on our genes and the way we think, we end up with a personality that is cheerful or not. Now, the important thing would be, could we push things up? First, help the people who are really gloomy and really suffering for it. But in the end, maybe we could make everybody really happy and see what's beyond the current happiness ceilings.
And this does bridge into this discussion that I was having with my son about CRISPR and the sorts of things we might be able to do. But even how we frame it, we call it designer babies, where we're not saying, well, actually, there are various things that could kill us or could create congenital defects or whatever. And if we were able to remove them, should we? I mean, so there are all these questions. So without giving you too much to sort of unpack, how should we be looking at those things so that we can have the greatest, I don't know, contentment for individuals and society, and that we can, what was it, how did you put it earlier on? Where everybody will fit into the matrix of their roles in this cohesive, I don't know, friendly, cooperative way.
Yeah. So one question is, of course, even, is that matrix something fixed? And I would find it rather horrifying, this idea of a fixed society that is unchanged, where we're all in a little place, even though some people, to them, that sounds like heaven. There are some people who really, really enjoy having the firm social bonds, and loneliness is the kind of the worst thing ever. Other people can go, meh, yeah, I was self-isolating for a month, nothing to it. This is, of course, depends a little, indeed, it does depend on some genetic and neural differences. And it might be a good idea to have a right mix, because you both want a society that can evolve and change and discover new stuff, but you also want to have that warm, fuzzy core where many people can just feel like they belong. And when it comes to the designer babies, I think you can start out on the micro scale. What changes would make sense? And I'm probably fond of Julian Savulescu's principle of procreative beneficence that says, yeah, all things being equal, you want to give your child the best possible life they could have. But that's typically not going to depend on being green and having wings. Maybe that actually turns out to be an awesome life, but you can't know that. That's really particular and really weird. But on the other hand, being healthy, being smart, being long-lived, a lot of these things are good for practically all life projects. If your life project requires you to be dumb and sick, then you probably should reevaluate your life project anyway. So that's the micro scale, and you could totally imagine having parents just wanting to do that for the kids. You probably don't need to do much propaganda to have people want to do that. You might want to keep parents from doing more stupid stuff. But you also want to think about, okay, how do I institute my society to achieve this? Do I subsidize CRISPR? That might be one good idea. It might be that you want to have insurance. So if kids are unhappy with how their genes come about, they can sue the parents, and you want to, as a parent, to have parenting insurance. And the premiums go way up if you want to give your kid the wings and a green skin. So that's going to act as a soft thing. Or maybe you just have a rule against doing really stupid stuff. You can solve this in a lot of very different ways. And different societies might even say, yeah, because of these moral and cultural reasons, we are going to set up this particular system. while others might actually say, we want flexibility.
And then historically we see, because we also have this need to come out on top, or certain of us do or don't, and there's these sort of self-drivers that we will try to figure out, or some of us will try to figure out ways to screw with the regulations or not, you know. And so one would think that one of the first things that we should remove, but it goes back to what you said earlier with CRISPR, is this idea of, you know, greed, but you want a little bit, but not too much. We've got all of these. So, yeah.
So when I make my mental list of what would I change about the human condition, most emotions do get a pass. I just want to refine them. There are very few emotions I say, yeah, let's get rid of that. Cruelty, I think, is one that we actually want to throw away. So cruelty is taking pleasure in the misfortune or frustration of somebody else. And I think there might even be a good reason why we have that emotion. And that is, in that little tribe, when we want to keep Jim from misbehaving too much, sometimes we need to tell him and yell at him or even throw rocks at him because he's disobeying the norms. Unfortunately, he's yelling at us back and throwing rocks at us. It's actually no fun arguing with Jim because he's a bit. So the problem is, being pro-social means that I need to actually take a hit for the team and have a fight with Jim occasionally. That is tricky. So evolution has kind of sweetened the deal. There is this cruel relish in messing with Jim because I don't like him. Now, this is great if we're a small tribe. But today we have police forces. We have reputations. We have locks on the doors. We have certificates on the internet. Basically, what we have done as we scaled up society is that you can't just rely on people working together in a nice way. You set up a police force, the chieftain has his guards, and then gradually the guards turns into an army, and the army needs accountants to make sure that nobody's stealing the money. So we create all sorts of systems, guardrails, locks, reputations that keep us behaving well. Much of the core of this is still very human. I'm not stealing because my mother told me at a very early age that it's wrong to steal. I also learned a lot because when I took toys from my brother, he hit me back. So these have inculcated certain behaviors. But later on, of course, now I have a reputation to defend. If it turns out that I'm not returning books to the library, oh dear, my reputation as a good academic might suffer. Or I might get a fine. Or if it's some more serious crime, the police might grab me. So we have created an interlocking set of safeguards, which means that cruelty might actually not be quite as important anymore. Because the modern counterpart of Jim, that guy who's misbehaved, well, we can actually call the police. We can actually call the insurance company and so on. We can rein him in using other tools. Now, the problem is we are becoming dependent on this complicated edifice of civilization instead. If that crashes, it's suddenly back to rocks and trying to handle Jim on our own. But we better make civilization work because we can't survive without it. And it has so many good things to give us. Everything from the art and music over to not having to throw rocks at misbehaving neighbors.